The memory of the day my father passed still haunts me, not because of the pain of loss itself, though immense, that was natural and expected, but because of the grotesque transformation that took hold of my half-brother, Ricardo. Before, he was a distant man, cordial in the few times we met. After, he became a hungry vulture, ready to devour everything my father had built. I remember the wake, a sea of sad faces, whispered condolences, the heavy air of grief. Ricardo, however, seemed oblivious to that collective mourning. His eyes, once discreet, now blazed with an almost feverish intensity, sweeping the room as if inspecting the spoils of a freshly won battle. It was right after the funeral, in the meeting to discuss the will, that the mask finally fell. The coldness in his tone was cutting, his arrogance unbearable. He sat at the head of the table, as if he already owned everything, and spoke the words that echo in my mind to this day. "She doesn't deserve a penny." He was referring to my mother, Clara, the woman who dedicated the last 30 years of her life to loving and caring for my father. The woman who stood by his side through every hardship, every triumph. The woman who, in Ricardo's eyes, was just an intruder, a gold digger. Rage consumed me from within. I felt my blood boil, the urge to confront him right there, to expose his pettiness in front of everyone. But I restrained myself. I knew I needed to be smarter, more strategic. My mother needed me. Ricardo, with a scornful smile on his face, presented the updated will, a document that, according to him, expressed my father's final wishes. A document that relegated my mother to a small pension, practically ignoring her contribution to the family's wealth. I watched the world crumble on my mother's shoulders. Her eyes, once full of life, became opaque, flooded with deep sadness. She didn't deserve that. No one did. And I, as much as it hurt, knew I had to fight. Ricardo, feeling victorious, seemed immune to any argument. He boasted of being the blood son, the legitimate heir. He claimed my father had always favored him, that the family business was his by right. The insults were constant, the threats veiled. He challenged me to prove otherwise, certain that nothing could stop his unbridled ambition. But Ricardo, in his blindness, made a fatal mistake. A mistake that he, in his haste to usurp the inheritance, simply ignored. An old prenuptial agreement, meticulously drafted by my father, hidden among so many dusty papers. A document that, if used correctly, could completely change the course of that story. That yellowed piece of paper, found by chance among the paperwork in my father's office, was our last hope. But how to use it? How to turn it into a weapon against Ricardo's greed? The answer, I knew, would be found in the courts, and the legal battle that loomed promised to be long and bloody. But I was ready. For my mother, for my father's memory, and for the justice that Ricardo, in his arrogance, believed he had outsmarted. The dust of time seemed embedded in that contract. The letters, typewritten on an old machine, faded under my trembling fingers. There, in complex legal terms, lay the key to unmasking Ricardo's farce. The prenuptial agreement signed by my father and mother before marriage detailed minutely the separation of assets. More than that, it protected my mother's patrimony in case of death, guaranteeing her a significant percentage of the inheritance. I felt a mix of relief and fury, relief for having found a weapon to fight injustice. Fury that Ricardo had been so greedy as to ignore such an important document. He, with his arrogance, believed that the will's update would be enough to silence any questioning. Little did he know that the past often holds the answers for the present. I embraced my mother, trying to transmit to her the hope that was reborn in my chest. "Mom, I found something that can help us," I whispered, feeling her wrinkled hands squeeze mine. Her eyes, previously dark, shone with a faint light. She didn't ask what it was. She just trusted me, and that trust was all I needed to move forward. The first step was to find a lawyer. I needed someone experienced, who wouldn't be intimidated by Ricardo's smooth talk, someone who believed in our cause and was willing to fight to the end. After some referrals, I found Dr. Renata, a renowned professional, known for her ethics and insight. I remember the first meeting in her office, an elegant environment with walls full of books and diplomas. Dr. Renata listened to me attentively, without interrupting, while I recounted the entire story. Her brown eyes, behind thin-rimmed glasses, conveyed a seriousness that inspired confidence. When I finished speaking, she took the prenuptial agreement and examined it thoroughly. She ran her fingers over the faded letters, as if trying to decipher the secrets contained there. After a few minutes of silence, she finally spoke. "This document is an ace. If it's authentic and valid, we can contest the will and guarantee your mother's rights." I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time since my father's death, I glimpsed a light at the end of the tunnel. The battle would be arduous, I knew. Ricardo wouldn't give up easily, but with Dr. Renata by our side, I was certain we weren't alone. The legal battle began with the contestation of the updated will. Dr. Renata presented the prenuptial agreement as proof that my mother had the right to a larger part of the inheritance. Ricardo, furious, denied the document's validity, claiming it was old and that my father had changed his mind over the years. The hearings followed, one after another, each more tense than the last. Ricardo appeared accompanied by his lawyers, displaying an air of superiority. He stared at me with contempt, as if I were a mere obstacle in his path. But I wouldn't be intimidated. I knew the truth was on our side. In one of the hearings, Ricardo went so far as to insult my mother, calling her a gold digger and opportunist. I saw her face contract with pain, tears silently streaming down her cheeks. Rage consumed me inside, but I remained firm. I couldn't give in to provocation. I needed to stay calm to avoid harming our cause. Dr. Renata, with her firm and eloquent voice, refuted Ricardo's arguments, demonstrating the fragility of his allegations. She presented documents, witnesses, and evidence that corroborated the prenuptial agreement's validity. With each passing day, Ricardo's situation became more delicate. The turning point, however, happened at an unexpected moment. During testimony, an old business partner of my father's, who had witnessed the signing of the prenuptial agreement, revealed that Ricardo had pressured my father to update the will, promising to take care of the family business in exchange for a larger share of the inheritance. Ricardo's mask fell completely. His farce was exposed before everyone. The judge, visibly outraged, severely reprimanded him. That testimony was crucial for the legal battle's outcome. The truth finally came to light, and Ricardo, in his greed, had dug his own grave. But even with the truth coming to light, Ricardo didn't give up. He still had one card up his sleeve, one last resort to try to prevent my mother from receiving what was due to her. And that card, I feared, could ruin everything. What would he do? What would be his next move? The uncertainty gnawed at me inside, but I was determined to fight to the end. Justice, I knew, was near, but the path to it would still be long and tortuous. Ricardo's last gambit kept me in constant alarm. I knew he wouldn't surrender without a fight, and this persistence gave me chills. Dr. Renata, noticing my apprehension, tried to reassure me, but the shadow of doubt hovered over me. What was he plotting? What would be the final blow? The silence that followed my father's old business partner's testimony was deafening. Ricardo, cornered, seemed like a caged beast, his eyes flashing hatred. He refused to admit defeat, clinging to a hope that in my eyes had already vanished. Days turned into weeks, and the anguish only increased. I found myself reviewing every detail of the process, every word spoken, every exchanged glance. I needed to be prepared for any eventuality, for any surprise Ricardo might have in store for us. Amid this turbulence, my mother remained serene, almost resigned. She seemed to have accepted her fate, as if the battle were already lost. This attitude revolted me, gave me even more strength to fight. I wouldn't allow Ricardo to humiliate her this way. I wouldn't allow him to steal what was rightfully hers. One day, I received an unexpected call from Dr. Renata. Her voice, normally calm and thoughtful, conveyed an urgency that alarmed me. "We need to talk urgently," she said, without beating around the bush. "I think Ricardo is about to do something desperate." We met at her office the same day. Dr. Renata was visibly worried. She explained that she had received information from an anonymous source, indicating that Ricardo was planning to discredit my mother by spreading rumors about her conduct during her marriage to my father. Apparently, he had hired private detectives to dig into my mother's past, searching for any information that could tarnish her reputation. The objective was clear: to disqualify her morally so the judge would consider her unworthy of the inheritance. Rage struck me like lightning. Ricardo had crossed every line. He wasn't content with stealing my mother's money. Now he also wanted to destroy her honor. That was the lowest blow he could have dealt. Dr. Renata advised me to stay calm and not fall for the provocation. She assured me she was taking all necessary measures to protect my mother and unmask Ricardo's lies. But I knew I needed to do something more. I couldn't stand idly by while he tried to destroy my mother's life. I decided to confront Ricardo. I arranged to meet him at a cafe in a public place to avoid any kind of physical confrontation. I needed to look into his eyes and show him that I wasn't afraid, that I wouldn't be intimidated by his threats. When I saw him arrive, I felt a knot form in my stomach. His face was tense, his eyes red with anger. He sat at the table without greeting me and stared at me with contempt. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice laden with sarcasm. I took a deep breath and looked him in the eyes. "I know what you're doing," I said, my voice firm. "I know you're trying to defame my mother, but I won't let you do that. I'll fight to the end to protect her honor." Ricardo smiled, a cold and threatening smile. "You're naive," he replied. "You think you can stop me? I have more power, more money, and more contacts than you'll ever have. I'll destroy you and your mother." I didn't let myself be intimidated. "You may have all that," I retorted, "but I have the truth on my side, and truth always prevails." Ricardo stood up from the table, furious. "You'll regret challenging me," he said, before turning and leaving the cafe. That encounter left me shaken but also strengthened me. I knew the final battle was approaching, and I needed to be prepared for everything. "Doctor, Renata warned me that Ricardo might try to bribe witnesses, manipulate evidence, and even use violence to get what he wanted." I then decided to hire a private investigator to monitor Ricardo's steps and discover what his next moves were. I needed to have an ace up my sleeve, something I could use against him if he tried anything illegal. The investigator brought me valuable information. I discovered that Ricardo was secretly meeting with a judge at a luxury hotel in the city. Apparently, he was trying to bribe him to favor his cause in the trial. That information was explosive. If I could prove that Ricardo was trying to corrupt a judge, he would lose everything. But how to get the necessary evidence? How to expose his corruption without putting my life at risk? The answer to that question, I knew, lay in an old recorder that my father used to register his business meetings, a device I had found by chance among his belongings, which could contain the key to unmask Ricardo's farce once and for all. But would I have the courage to use it? Would I be willing to risk everything to do justice? The decision was difficult, but I knew I needed to act quickly. Time was running out, and Ricardo was getting closer to achieving his goals. The dusty recorder rested in the palm of my hand, cold and heavy like a sentence, an artifact from the past, now loaded with explosive potential. That small device, silent witness to so many of my father's negotiations and confidences, could be the key to unmasking Ricardo's corruption and ensuring justice for my mother. But using it meant crossing a thin line, entering a dark and dangerous territory. I hesitated for a moment. The idea of spying on Ricardo, of recording his secret conversations, caused me some discomfort. I wasn't the type of person who resorted to subterfuge and tricks, but Ricardo's greed and cruelty forced me to act. He wasn't playing fair, and I couldn't afford to be complacent. I took a deep breath, pushed away the doubts, and put the recorder in my bag. I needed to act cautiously, plan each step with precision. I couldn't simply invade the hotel and record Ricardo's conversation with the judge. That would be too risky, could ruin everything. I decided to ask for help from the private investigator, Mr. Silva. He was an experienced professional, accustomed to dealing with delicate situations. I explained to him my suspicion that Ricardo was trying to bribe the judge and showed him the recorder. Mr. Silva listened to me attentively, without showing surprise. He had seen everything in his career. After a few minutes of silence, he told me, "We need concrete evidence. A recording would be perfect, but we need to obtain it legally." He explained that for the recording to be valid as evidence in court, we needed to obtain a judicial authorization. Otherwise, it could be considered illegal and discarded. The idea of requesting judicial authorization seemed risky to me. I was afraid Ricardo would discover our plans and take measures to stop us. But Mr. Silva assured me he knew how to proceed discreetly, without raising suspicions. He filed a request for judicial authorization, claiming we had information that Ricardo was involved in illegal activities and that we needed to record his conversations to obtain evidence. To my surprise, the judge granted the authorization. With the judicial authorization in hand, Mr. Silva planned the operation meticulously. He installed hidden cameras in the hotel room where Ricardo would meet with the judge and placed a microphone in the recorder I would carry with me. On the day of the meeting, I dressed discreetly and headed to the hotel. Mr. Silva was waiting for me in the lobby, disguised as a guest. He handed me the recorder and gave me final instructions. "Be cautious," he said. "Don't expose yourself. Just record the conversation and get out of there as quickly as possible." I entered the hotel room with my heart in my throat. Ricardo and the judge were already there, sitting at the table, talking in low voices. I tried to act naturally, as if I knew nothing. "Sorry for being late," I said with a forced smile. "I had an unexpected situation." Ricardo gave me a suspicious look, but said nothing. The judge just nodded. I sat at the table and waited for the right moment to turn on the recorder. The conversation between Ricardo and the judge was mundane, about pleasantries, but I knew that soon they would get to the subject that really mattered, and it didn't take long. Ricardo began praising the judge, talking about his unblemished reputation and how much he admired his work. Then he took an envelope from his pocket and placed it on the table. "I have a small token here for you," he said with a malicious smile. "A gesture of gratitude for your attention to my case." The judge took the envelope and opened it. His eyes widened when he saw what was inside. It was a considerable amount of money. "Ricardo, you shouldn't have done this," the judge said, his voice hesitant. "I can't accept this," Ricardo insisted. "Please accept it," he said. "It's just a gift, a way to show my gratitude." The judge hesitated for a moment, but eventually gave in. He put the envelope in his pocket and thanked Ricardo. At that moment, I had the proof I needed. Proof that Ricardo was trying to bribe a judge. I turned on the recorder and continued recording the conversation. Ricardo and the judge began discussing the trial details, combining strategies to favor Ricardo's cause. With every word that came out of their mouths, I felt a mix of disgust and indignation. After a few minutes, the conversation came to an end. Ricardo and the judge said goodbye, and the judge left the room. Ricardo turned to me with a triumphant smile on his face. "You see," he said, "I told you I would win. I have the power to do whatever I want." At that moment, I felt uncontrollable rage. I couldn't contain myself. I stood up from the table and stared Ricardo in the eyes. "You're scum," I said, my voice trembling with hatred. "You're corrupt, a liar and a thief, but your farce is over. I have proof of everything." Ricardo went pale. He realized he had been discovered. "What are you saying?" he asked, his voice choked. I took the recorder from my bag and showed it to him. I recorded everything, I said. Everything you said and did. Your corruption will be exposed for everyone to see. Ricardo tried to grab the recorder from my hand, but I dodged. He was desperate, afraid of losing everything he had achieved. That was the moment of truth, the time to confront him with his own lies and make him pay for his crimes. But suddenly, Ricardo's expression changed. The desperation gave way to a cold, calculating smile that chilled my blood. "You think you're so smart," he said slowly, pulling out his phone. "But you made one fatal mistake. You see, I knew someone was onto me, so I had a little insurance policy prepared." My stomach dropped as he showed me the phone screen. There, in grainy surveillance footage, was my mother entering a bank 3 days ago. A bank where she had apparently withdrawn a large sum of money. "Your precious, innocent mother has been embezzling from Dad's company for years," Ricardo said, his voice dripping with venom. "Every month, small amounts. Not enough to notice right away, but over time, well, it adds up to quite a fortune. She's been playing the grieving widow while sitting on a pile of stolen money." I stared at the screen, my world spinning. That's impossible." "You're lying. The bank records don't lie," Ricardo continued, now standing and straightening his jacket, "and neither do the forensic accountants I hired. Your mother has been systematically stealing from the family business for over a decade. She's no victim. She's a criminal." He leaned closer, his breath hot against my ear. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to destroy that recording, drop this whole charade, and walk away. Because if you don't, I'll have your dear mother arrested for grand larceny. She'll spend the rest of her golden years in prison." My hands were shaking as I looked at the evidence on his phone. The timestamps, the bank surveillance, the withdrawal records. It all looked legitimate, but something felt wrong. My mother she couldn't. "I can see the wheels turning," Ricardo smirked. "You're wondering if sweet, innocent Clara really is the saint you thought she was. Well, wonder no more. She's been stealing from us all along, and now I have the proof." But then I noticed something, a small detail that Ricardo had missed in his arrogance. In one of the surveillance photos, I could see part of a sign in the background. It wasn't from 3 days ago. It was from last year, when the bank was still under renovation. The construction scaffolding was clearly visible. Ricardo had fabricated the evidence. The dates had been altered, the story manufactured. He was so desperate to destroy us that he had resorted to forgery. I looked up at him, and for the first time in this whole ordeal I smiled. "You know what, Ricardo? You're right. My mother isn't perfect, but she's not a thief either." I held up my phone, which had been recording our entire conversation. "And now I have you on tape, admitting to bribery and attempting to frame an innocent woman with forged evidence." The color drained from Ricardo's face as he realized his mistake. "Game over," I said, walking toward the door. "I'll see you in court, again." As I left the hotel room, I heard Ricardo's panicked voice behind me. "Wait! We can work this out! We can make a deal!" But I was already gone. The truth had finally won. 6 months later, Ricardo was sentenced to 5 years in prison for bribery, attempted fraud, and perjury. The judge he tried to corrupt was disbarred and faced his own criminal charges. My mother received her rightful inheritance, including a controlling stake in the family business. She used the money to establish a foundation helping families fight inheritance fraud. As for me, I learned that sometimes the truth is worth fighting for, no matter how dirty the battle gets. Justice, it turns out, really does prevail, even when it takes a little help from modern technology and an old recorder that captured more than my father ever intended.